Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Rebecca Roberts.
And I'm Yochanan El Rom.
In our top story, the African state of Sierra Leone has announced that it will be establishing its embassy in Israel's capital, Jerusalem. This comes just 1 week after Paraguay announced that it will also relocate its diplomatic mission to the undivided capital of the Jewish state, and 1 week before Papua New Guinea formally opens its embassy in Jerusalem. They will join the United States, Guatemala, Honduras, and Kosovo in the Holy City. And Israel's foreign ministry announced that it is expecting similar announcements from Hungary and Fiji later this month. In 2018, former U.S. President Donald Trump announced his decision to move the American embassy to Jerusalem, prompting other countries to join in recognizing Israeli sovereignty in the eternal capital of the Jewish people.
The administration of U.S. President Joe Biden has agreed to unfreeze $6 billion in Iranian funds in yet another humiliating capitulation to Iran, the world's largest state sponsor of international terror. Releasing the money is in exchange for transferring 5 American citizens from an Iranian prison to house arrest in the radical Shiite state. This move comes despite America's long-standing policy of refusing to negotiate with terrorists and the failure of the Biden White House to secure the release of 3 other Americans held by the fanatic regime. Former U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, speaking to the Jerusalem Post, warned that the ransom could serve to motivate further hostage-taking and potentially escalate terrorist activities. He said the money will go directly into the hands of Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi, otherwise known as the Butcher of Tehran, and will be controlled by the Ayatollah, resulting in more danger for everyone. The cash influx will provide a lifeline to the radical Islamic Republic, which has been crippled by international sanctions imposed for its rapidly advancing rogue nuclear weapons program, which poses a great threat to Israel and the West.
The foreign minister of Libya has been forced to flee her country after meeting with her Israeli counterpart in Italy. Najala Mangoush and Eli Cohen met in Italy recently, where they discussed future cooperation between their countries. This marks the first ever official meeting between representatives of Jerusalem and Tripoli, and it was hailed as the first step in the establishment of ties between the nations. According to initial reports, Cohen and Mangoush discussed the possibility of Israeli humanitarian aid and cooperation in the areas of agriculture and water management, as well as preserving the endangered Jewish heritage sites throughout Libya. Unfortunately, public backlash against possible normalization with Israel, which involved protests and the public burning of the Israeli flag, prompted Libyan Prime Minister Abdul Hamid al-Dabeibi to terminate Mangoush from her position as foreign minister and call for an investigation into her actions.
In sports news, it's a first for the Jewish state. Israel's team has brought home the gold in the World Championship for rhythmic gymnastics. The Israeli athletes beat out China and Spain in the group all-around category. The competition was held in Valencia, Spain. The young Israelis released a statement saying, "We were so happy that we were able to win this medal and got to hear our national anthem on the podium."
The Lebanese National Security Ministry recently announced that it had raided several retail locations and confiscated Israeli products being sold in stores throughout the country. Lebanon remains in a state of war with Israel and does not allow trade with the Jewish state. The ministry stated that it had summoned several individuals for questioning and the selling of goods produced by companies belonging to what they called the enemy Israel. Syrian citizens have once again taken to the streets to protest Bashar al-Assad's oppressive dictatorship. The revived calls to oust the tyrant came on the heels of an announcement by the regime that it would be ending fuel subsidies. In 2011, anti-government protests were brutally suppressed by Assad, who used chemical weapons against the civilian population of Syria, leading to a decade-long civil war which left the country in economic devastation.
The United States Marine Corps is advancing its plans to purchase the Israeli-made Iron Dome missile defense system. The $200 million deal involves 3 Iron Dome units, which includes 44 launchers and 1,840 Tamir missile interceptors. This advanced anti-missile system is equipped with detection capabilities and guidance radar and has proven to be highly effective in saving lives from the thousands of rockets launched on the Israeli civilian population by Hamas in Gaza.
Hundreds of former IDF soldiers will become Holocaust educators in countries around the globe as part of a program by the World Zionist Organization, or WZO. The goal of the program is to keep the memory of the Holocaust alive through education and to spread awareness of the dangers of anti-Semitism. As volunteers for the Heroes of Life organization, the former soldiers will travel to dozens of locations teaching about the Holocaust and sharing stories from survivors, as well as the righteous among the nations who risked their lives to hide and save Jews from the Nazis.
Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant briefed the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres on the growing threat that Hezbollah and Iran pose to the Jewish state. Gallant detailed increasing provocations by the Iranian proxy army, which operates in Lebanon and has raised alerts on Israel's northern border. He stressed that the UN troops in the area must enforce the Israeli-Lebanese armistice agreement and step up their patrols along the blue demarcation line. Iran continues to fund, train, and arm Islamic militants to commit vicious acts of terror against Israelis. This comes as Israeli security officials have thwarted the smuggling of hundreds of sophisticated Iranian weapons into the Jewish state. Rebecca has more on that.
Yes, Yochanan, Israel's security agency Shin Bet has announced the arrest of 4 Israeli Arabs who are part of a Hezbollah weapons smuggling operation. The suspects were involved in transporting Iranian-made explosives as well as large quantities of lethal weapons into the Jewish state. A statement released by Shin Bet explained that Hezbollah has worked to recruit and operate an infrastructure of smugglers in Israel for the purpose of distributing illegal weapons. It added that the incident illustrates the efforts of terror elements from Hezbollah and Iran to exploit Arab citizens in Israel for terror activities.
The California State Board of Education has issued a statement condemning bias, bigotry, and discrimination in high school courses. 2 years ago, California Governor Gavin Newsom penned a law requiring all public high school students in the Golden State to complete at least one semester of ethnic studies. American Jewish groups applauded this effort to expand understanding of ethnic groups, saying that Governor Newsom had taken a major step in the right direction, but they added there is still a lot of work ahead to ensure that California's schools are free from anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism.
The Israeli Ministry of Agriculture has completed a project in the Arab city of Jenin aimed at strengthening food security in areas controlled by the Palestinian Authority. The 4-year pilot project included major investments from the Jewish state in equipment, water filters, and training for local Arab operators, and resulted in the production of several tons of fresh fish for the local market. The ministry noted that it also initiated a similar fish farm project in Tulkarem. Guy Rubenstein, the director of aquaculture at the Israeli Agriculture Ministry, explained that the goal of these projects is to encourage Arabs to grow their own food independently and to promote knowledge acquisition in the Arab sector.
An Israeli medical device company based in the town of Yokneam has successfully implanted its groundbreaking heart valve into 2 patients in the United States. Trisol Medical Limited has patented its transcatheter tricuspid valve, which can be implanted in a minimally invasive procedure, eliminating the need for cardiopulmonary bypass in patients suffering from symptomatic tricuspid regurgitation, or TR. This life-threatening condition can lead to heart failure if left untreated. The new technique was part of an early feasibility study conducted by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. Doctors had high praise for the success of the new procedure, calling it a major milestone in the treatment of TR. They said within hours, the patients experienced a gratifying result with essential elimination of tricuspid regurgitation and rapid recovery, along with significant improvement in symptoms.
Israeli archaeologists are hailing the discovery of a Second Temple period aqueduct as the longest upper-level channel discovered in Jerusalem to date. The 300-meter aqueduct was one of 2 conduits constructed to carry water from natural springs in Bethlehem into the Holy City. The upper channel ferried water to the royal palaces of ancient Jerusalem, while the lower one delivered water to the temple. Experts from the Israel Antiquities Authority marveled at the quality of the construction, noting that in some places the aqueduct stood 3 meters or nearly 10 feet high. Eli Esquisito, the director of the IAA, explained, "The Jerusalem Aqueduct tells the story of the city of Jerusalem. They testify to the glory days of the Second Temple and the destruction of the city by the Romans."
That concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein, and we're here in our beautiful studio in Jerusalem. My guest today is Steve Leibowitz. He's the president of American football in Israel. Steve, thank you for being on the show.
Good to see you, Josh.
Steve, tell our viewers a little about what is American football in Israel.
Well, we started back in 1988 with just a bunch of friends getting together to play touch football, and it's grown into 2,000 players around the country with adult and youth tackle leagues, flag football leagues, men, women, children, and a lot of coaches, including fathers, as you're one.
Well, NFL football is finally back. My Cowboys are looking fierce. In America, the Cowboys are America's team, but in Israel, it's the Patriots who are Israel's team because of Robert Kraft. Can you tell us about his involvement?
To be fair, people root for all the teams, but their second team at least, if not their first team, is the Patriots, because Robert Kraft is our main sponsor. He's contributed a tremendous amount to our program, mainly, but not only, to the infrastructure. He created the first field that we built in Jerusalem back in 1999, a small one. He built a big sport campus, which is 3 huge fields, one of them designated for football, the first real football field in the Middle East. And now he's just donated $5 million to build a new field in Haifa that a year from now, next September, we should be able to see it operating.
You alluded to our coaching together last season. We did very well in the Hanukkah Cup. I have to say, for me, it was very important to have my kids, even though they're Israeli and they're born Israeli, love football. I grew up in America. I grew up in Dallas, Texas. Football was paramount. How much of the other fathers in the leagues, the other people, are in my situation?
So in the beginning, we were mostly guys like you and their kids, immigrants who would put their American-born or American-raised kids into this program because it was something from back home. Now we say it's Hebrew in the huddle. The vast majority of our players now are Israelis who learned the game because they heard about it here, sometimes from their friends, sometimes from our getting the games on television stations here. They're really involved. But I'll tell you the most important thing. It happened as I was walking into your studio. A woman who is the mother of a player. I didn't know this about her before. She came up to me and she said, "My son is going into the Army for 3 years, starting this week. And he is a whole different person because of what football gave him. He trained with the team for this entire year, and it really prepared him for combat in the Israeli army." We've heard this from so many parents, and I've heard from so many other parents how this has helped the grades of their kids, putting them into this kind of a situation where they're getting training and direction, and football is a kind of a game that just lends itself to improving kids in a lot of ways.
A couple of years ago in the Super Bowl, we got the first Jewish MVP, Julian Edelman. It was a big deal. How long until we're going to get the first Israeli MVP? When are we going to start seeing Israelis playing in NFL?
Well, I can tell you it's got to be pretty soon because I'm getting on in age and so is Mr. Kraft, and both of us have vowed that we will continue at this. Neither of us will retire until we have an Israeli playing in the NFL. We do have, by the way, a few Israelis now playing Division I football. So that's a step. It doesn't mean you'll make the NFL, but it means you're on the step closest to it. It's kind of like minor league in baseball.
You're doing a lot of very interesting stuff. It's not just, tackle football leagues. You have flag leagues. You have women and men playing together in leagues. You have women leagues.
Flag is the future, and in fact, it's expected that it's going to be going to the Olympics. It's going to be announced probably in a few months from now. It'll be in the Los Angeles Olympics in 2028. And so we're already beginning to prepare teams with a mind on we have to have the younger players, not our oldest players now, but some of the younger generation, bring them up and put them at Olympic level. And I think we can make it, both on the men's side and on the women's side.
Why has it become such a big sport? I see that we're playing in Europe now a lot. We're starting to get really good at it.
The NFL is really pushing this financially. They're driving programs around the country. Part of this has to do in the United States, but also around the world. Part of it has to do with concussions. It has to do with perceived dangers that parents are afraid to have their kids in tackle programs. When parents come to me, I usually say that our kids don't hit hard enough to even worry about that. But in all seriousness, it is an issue, and it's an issue that's being addressed by changing rules and better safety equipment and all of the rest. But in the meantime, flag football is a version of the game that gives all the skills of catching and running and throwing without all the hits. And we like it, especially for the younger kids. We like to introduce tackle football when kids have reached high school age, beginning then.
We're seeing NFL games in London, in Germany. We're seeing it in Mexico. Are we ever going to see one in Israel?
I wish we could have. I've actually explored the possibility with Mr. Kraft, who would love to bring his team here. I don't think we yet have the fan base. We're getting there. I think we will get there. Germany and England are both ahead of us, and some other countries in Europe have larger NFL fan bases than we have for now. It will grow along with the sport itself. I think we can see growth every year and more interest in football, but we're still a long way from the main sports in the country like soccer and basketball.
Steve, there are literally tens of millions of people watching this show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
Our program is helping kids all over the country, disadvantaged kids, immigrant kids. Football, American football, is a great sport. So if you're a lover of Israel and football, help AFI.
Thank you, Steve, for being on the show. And thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein, saying go Cowboys. Now back to the studio.
Up next, the truth from Zion.
The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, otherwise known as the JCPOA, is the nuclear agreement that world powers created to combat Iran's quest to manufacture nuclear weapons. 6 major world powers, the United States, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Russia, and China, all came on board, signing the deal in 2015 with the intention of limiting Iran's ability to develop weapons of mass destruction. The agreement called for strict limitations on and the monitoring of Iran's nuclear activities. In return, Iran would get relief from economic sanctions, which the international community placed on the country in 1979, when the imperial state of Iran was overthrown by the Islamic Republic, which is still ruling today. Up until 1979, Iran was a more westernized nation, where people had the power to express themselves freely, both religiously and culturally. This came to a dramatic end following the Islamic Revolution, led by Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. Most of the world responded to the overthrow by ceasing to do business with Iran, resulting in an economic decline. Iran committed to significant reductions in its nuclear program. They agreed to limit uranium enrichment, which is a process used to produce nuclear fuel. They also agreed to reduce their stockpile of enriched uranium and change their nuclear facilities to make them less capable of producing weapons-grade material. Or at least that's what they promised to the world. Iran got access to many of its assets that had been frozen, and as trade renewed, the country experienced an economic boost. The terms of the JCPOA included routine inspections, which the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, would conduct. But Israeli intelligence said the organization was simply not doing its job. In April of 2018, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu came out with findings that shocked the world.
A few weeks ago, in a great intelligence achievement, Israel obtained 100,000 secret files, and here's what we got. Iran lied about never having a nuclear weapons program. After signing the nuclear deal in 2015, Iran intensified its efforts to hide its secret nuclear files. Even after the deal, Iran continued to preserve and expand its nuclear weapons know-how for future use. Iran lied again in 2015 when it didn't come clean to the IAEA as required by the nuclear deal. The Iran deal, the nuclear deal, is based on lies.
Much of the world watched with disbelief. Organizations like Al Jazeera and the BBC referred to his statements as mere accusations. The JCPOA was never supposed to be a permanent agreement. It had a time limit and specific provisions that needed to be met. The deal was designed to be reviewed and renewed periodically. When Netanyahu called the agreement into question, its closest ally, the United States, took the evidence seriously. Israel breathed a sigh of relief in May of 2018 when U.S. President Donald Trump withdrew the United States from the JCPOA and reimposed sanctions on Iran.
This was a horrible, one-sided deal that should have never, ever been made.
Trump referred to the deal as the worst deal ever made in history because it gave the Iranian government everything with nothing in return. Today we have definitive proof that this Iranian promise was a lie. Since the initial revelation by Netanyahu, Israel has shown the world more and more evidence conclusively exposing the Iranian regime's true ambitions of pursuing nuclear weapons. Nevertheless, world leaders are hopeful that the United States will rejoin the accord, while much of the Jewish world, and certainly the State of Israel, are working hard to prevent a horrible one-sided deal from reemerging.
It didn't bring calm, it didn't bring peace, and it never will.
Iran's leadership has said time and time again that it wants to wipe Israel off the face of the map, and has even publicly alluded to using nuclear weapons to do so. Israeli officials are lobbying world leaders and conducting high-level meetings to share their concerns and their hard evidence of Iran's real intentions in an effort to convince those leaders that Iran poses a risk not only to Israel's security, but the security of the region and the entire world. And now, shining light from Israel.
The Old Testament tells us how people that are shepherds and farmers lived at the ancient time. These scriptures come to life, connecting you to the people of Israel. Here we are in Neot Qedumim, the biblical landscape reserve in Israel, the biggest botanical garden in Israel, which sits on the slopes of Samaria hills, which are behind me, and located in the area which is called Modi'in, the land of the Hasmonites and the Maccabees. This reserve spreads on 625 acres. These hills are dotted with olive groves, vineyards, wheat fields. So join me to explore Neot Qedumim. In Neot Qedumim, the scriptures come to life. Visitors can tour the land. You can learn how people lived at the ancient time. See the different plants that are mentioned in the scriptures. You can also plant trees, put your roots in the land. You can herd the flock and learn how to be a shepherd. You can meet a Torah scribe and understand his work. You can make your own biblical meal on open fire. You can feel the Bible. And when I say feel, I mean with all your senses. You can see, smell, taste, touch, and hear. Most of the shrubs and some of the animals mentioned in the Old Testament, the New Testament, Mishnah, and Talmud. The main idea in this reserve is to put the text in its context. And when we talk about the text, we talk about the Old and the New Testament. And to understand it, we have to go back in history time to the time of the Israelite in the land of Israel. At the ancient time, when the Israelite entered this land, they became shepherds and farmers. The herd, the flock which is behind me, is a good example for that, because we have a whole chapter in the book of John, chapter 10, that talks about the importance of the herd, which is the people of Israel. And when you understand it, you can understand why is it so important, and this is what we do here in this reserve. Here we are near a cistern, 2,000 years old. Picture it, because you can see it's an old stone. One of 64 cisterns we found here in this Jewish village from the time of the Second Temple, the time of Jesus in the land of Israel. The Old Testament tells us in this land the most important thing is water. You cannot live here without water. It rains only half a year without a drop of rain. So for that, you need a cistern. This cistern collects rainwater. And if you don't have this water, you will have to leave the land, like Abraham did and like Jacob's sons did. We have a special program for family groups. Small groups can come and enjoy everything. Sheep herding, a tour, and tree planting together in one package, because here you can actually understand the people that lived here at the ancient time. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you here in Neot Qedumim.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Rebecca Roberts.
And I'm Yochanan El-Rom, reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Please join us again next week for all of your Israel updates.